There exists a world where crystals pulse with the energy of life itself, where mist obscures both vision and truth, and where the line between existence and oblivion rests upon choices made by those who dare to question their purpose. This is Gaia, a planet caught between creation and destruction, where kingdoms wage war beneath perpetual fog, where manufactured soldiers march without souls, and where the very fabric of reality conceals a dying world desperate to consume the living. In this realm of airships and magic, of ancient summoners and artificial beings, a story unfolds that asks the most fundamental of questions. What does it mean to live when death is certain? What defines a person when their memories are false? And when faced with the void that seeks to unmake all existence, what gives us the strength to declare that we have the right to be? The world of Gaia stretches across 4 distinct continents, each separated by vast oceans and unified by a peculiar phenomenon that defines life upon its surface. The mist rises from the earth itself, a dense fog that blankets the land in an ethereal shroud, obscuring the ground and limiting vision to mere yards in places where it pools thickest. For generations, the people of Gaia have lived with this mist as an unchangeable constant of their world, adapting their lives around its presence, building their cities above its reach when possible, navigating its depths when necessary. They do not question its origin or its purpose. The mist simply is, as fundamental to their reality as gravity or time, an environmental constant that has shaped civilization's development in ways both obvious and subtle. The Mist Continent, so named for the perpetual fog that smothers its landscape, houses 4 major nations locked in an intricate dance of diplomacy, rivalry, and barely restrained ambition. Alexandria stands as perhaps the most powerful of these kingdoms, a realm of stone towers and grand architecture built into the side of a massive cliff face, its castle rising from the rock itself to dominate the skyline. The kingdom has long been ruled by the Alexandros line, and in the year 1799, Queen Brana sits upon its throne. She is a woman of considerable girth, and even more considerable appetite for power, though those who remember her from years past speak of a different person entirely, a ruler who once governed with wisdom and genuine care for her subjects. Lindblum represents a stark contrast to Alexandria's medieval grandeur. This city-state has embraced technology and progress with enthusiasm that borders on obsession, its workshops and factories churning out airships and machinery powered by an ingenious harnessing of the very mist that plagues the continent. Regent Tidfabul IX rules here, an inventor and engineer whose mind constantly churns with new designs and improvements, though he currently suffers under a curse placed by his wife, Hilda, that has transformed him into an oglop, a small insect-like creature, punishment for his infidelity. Despite this reduced form, his intellect remains sharp, and his city rises in concentric circles, each level connected by intricate systems of elevators and walkways, the entire metropolis a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and innovate. Steam and mist mingle in Lindblum's air, creating an atmosphere of industrial ambition that attracts merchants, inventors, and opportunists from across the continent. To the north lies Burmesha, the Rain Kingdom, home to a race of anthropomorphic rats who have built their civilization beneath perpetual rainfall that never ceases, never pauses, never shows even the briefest glimpse of clear sky. Water streams down ancient stone in endless rivulets, pooling in streets designed to channel its flow, creating a city that exists in harmony with precipitation that would drown any other settlement. The Burmesians are a proud warrior culture, their dragon knights legendary for their prowess in battle and their ability to leap incredible heights, wielding spears with deadly precision. They value honor and martial discipline above all else, their society structured around these principles in ways that outsiders often find difficult to comprehend. Clara, sister kingdom to Bermecia, has chosen isolation over engagement with the wider world. Built atop an enormous tree that rises from the desert on the southern edge of the continent, protected by a perpetual sandstorm that prevents approach by any without knowledge of the proper path, Clara represents Bermecian culture as it existed before contact with other nations. Where Bermecia has opened itself to trade and diplomacy, Clara maintains traditions unchanged for centuries, its people living in harmony with the ancient tree that provides their home, their sustenance, and their identity. The sandstorm is not natural but magical, maintained by the kingdom's priests and drawing power from the tree itself, a barrier that has kept Clara safe from the wars and conflicts that have periodically consumed the continent below. Between these major powers exist smaller settlements and villages, places like Dali with its farming community and windmills, Treno with its auction houses and stark division between wealthy aristocracy and desperate poor, and scattered hamlets that eke out existence in the shadow of kingdoms and the depths of mist. Travel between these locations is difficult and dangerous. The mist breeding monsters that lurk in its depths, creatures twisted by exposure to its energies into forms both bizarre and deadly. For most citizens of the Mist Continent, the world beyond their home village or city remains unknown, a realm of stories and speculation rather than lived experience. But the Mist Continent is not the entirety of Gaia. Beyond its borders lie the outer continent to the west, the forgotten continent to the east, and the lost continent to the north, each separated by oceans that most will never cross, each harboring their own mysteries and histories. The outer continent features lush forests and the ruined village of Madinsari, once home to a tribe of summoners whose eidolons were legendary, now little more than crumbling stone and fading memories. The forgotten continent holds the Ether Tree, a massive growth whose roots delve deep into the planet's core, its purpose unknown to the scattered inhabitants who give it wide berth, sensing something profoundly wrong in its presence. And in the frozen north of the lost continent, ancient structures of impossible design suggest civilizations that predate current recorded history by millennia. This is the world into which our story begins, a world on the cusp of changes that will shake its foundations and force every inhabitant to confront truths they would rather leave buried. Forces move in shadows, plans laid generations ago reach fruition, and ordinary people find themselves thrust into extraordinary circumstances that will determine not just their own fates, but the fate of existence itself. On the 15th day of January in the year 1799, the Kingdom of Alexandria celebrates the birthday of Princess Garnet till Alexandros the 16th, with grand festivities that draw crowds from across the realm. The centerpiece of these celebrations is a performance of the famous play I Want to Be Your Canary by the renowned playwright Lord Avon, performed by the travelling theatre troupe known as Tantalus. The streets fill with citizens eager to witness the spectacle. Vendors hawk their wares to the assembled masses, and the castle itself has been adorned with banners and decorations befitting the occasion. It is a day of joy and celebration, or at least it appears so on the surface. Beneath the festivities, currents of worry and fear run through the population. Whispers of the Queen's increasingly erratic behavior and growing militarism that has seen Alexandria's army expand dramatically in recent months. The Prima Vista, Tantalus theatre ship, approaches Alexandria as the sun sets its distinctive profile recognizable even to those unfamiliar with theatrical troupes. It is a vessel unlike any other, designed to serve as both transportation and performance venue, its hull opening to reveal a fully functional stage complete with props, sets, and all the technical apparatus necessary for elaborate productions. But Tantalus is more than they appear. Led by the gruff Baku, a man whose scarred face and powerful build seem at odds with theatrical pursuits, the troupe consists of skilled thieves and rogues who use their performances as cover for more lucrative and less legal activities. Tonight, they have been hired for their most audacious job yet, commissioned by Regent Kid of Lindblum to kidnap Princess Garnet herself and spirit her away from Alexandria before Queen Brana's ambitions can drag the continent into war. Among Tantalus members is Zidane Tribal, a young man with distinctive blonde hair that seems to defy gravity in its spikiness, and a long, prehensile tail that marks him as something other than entirely human. He is charming, flirtatious to a fault, and possessed of an easy confidence that serves him well in both thievery and more personal pursuits. Zidane views the world as an adventure waiting to happen. His philosophy simple and direct: help those in need, oppose injustice when you encounter it, and never miss an opportunity to chat up an attractive woman. This last trait is both his defining characteristic and his most frequent source of trouble, as his inability to resist flirting has complicated more missions than Baku cares to count. But when action is required, when the situation turns dangerous and lives hang in the balance, Zidane proves his worth time and again with skill, bravery, and a refusal to abandon those who depend on him. The performance of I Want to Be Your Canary begins as scheduled. The Prima Vistas stage descending to ground level as Queen Brana, Princess Garnet, and the assembled nobility take their seats. The play itself tells a romantic tale of forbidden love between a princess and a commoner, of duty versus desire, of the sacrifices made in pursuit of happiness against the demands of station and expectation. It is Princess Garnet's favorite play, a story she has requested repeatedly despite having seen it performed dozens of times, finding in its themes something that resonates deeply with her own circumstances. As the performance unfolds, Zidane plays the male lead with his characteristic charm, delivering lines with just enough sincerity mixed with playful irreverence to make the character memorable. And all the while, Tantalus prepares for the real purpose of their presence, positioning themselves for the abduction attempt that will unfold in the play's final act. What Tantalus does not know, what even Regent Sid has not been informed of, is that Princess Garnet has her own plans for this evening. She has noticed changes in her mother, transformations in Queen Brana's demeanor, and priorities that have escalated from concerning to frightening over recent months. The Queen, who once governed with justice and mercy, has become obsessed with expansion and power, speaking of conquest with a gleam in her eye that suggests something fundamental has broken in her mind. Garnet has overheard conversations not meant for her ears, discussions of weapons and war, of extracting eidolons and harvesting power regardless of cost. She has seen her mother transform from beloved parent to something approaching monster, and she knows with absolute certainty that she can no longer remain in Alexandria under Bran's control. So when Tantalus makes their move during the play's climax, bursting into the royal box to seize the princess as panicked nobles scatter and knights of Pluto rush to defend their charge, Garnet does something that catches everyone off guard. She goes willingly. The escape from Alexandria Castle becomes a chaotic running battle through corridors and courtyards as Tantalus fights their way back to the Prima Vista with their surprisingly cooperative hostage. Adelbert Steiner, captain of the Knights of Pluto, pursues with single-minded determination, unable to accept that his princess has been taken, unwilling to imagine failure in his duty to protect her. Steiner is the epitome of rigid knightly virtue, a man who lives by honor, duty, and unwavering loyalty to crown and country. He is also, it must be said, somewhat lacking in imagination and flexibility, his worldview divided cleanly into categories of right and wrong, with a little room for nuance or complexity. The idea that Princess Garnet might have her own reasons for leaving, that she might be in danger from her own mother, simply does not compute within Steiner's mental framework. To him, Tantalus are villains who have abducted the princess, and his duty is clear: pursue, rescue, and see the brigands brought to justice. Also swept up in the chaos is Vivi Ornitier, a small figure in an oversized pointed hat and blue jacket, glowing yellow eyes peering out from a face otherwise shrouded in darkness. Vivi is a black mage, one of the mysterious beings capable of wielding powerful elemental magic, though he himself knows almost nothing about his own origins or nature. He came to Alexandria for the play, having received a ticket from a kind shop owner in Treno, after expressing his love of theatre, travelling from his home with naive excitement about finally seeing a proper performance. Instead, he finds himself caught in a kidnapping attempt, swept aboard the Prima Vista in the confusion, unable to extract himself from events rapidly spiralling beyond his control or comprehension. Vivi is timid by nature, prone to stumbling over his words and his own feet, unsure of his place in the world and frightened by the magic that he can wield, but doesn't truly understand. He wants nothing more than to return home, to his quiet life studying books and practicing simple spells, to escape the overwhelming strangeness of everything happening around him. The Prima Vista launches with all four of them aboard, Garnet and Steiner and Vivi, joining Tantalus in a hasty departure from Alexandria as Queen Brane's forces mobilize below. But their escape does not go according to plan. A mysterious explosion rocks the ship as it gains altitude, damage to the engine causing catastrophic loss of power that sends the vessel plummeting from the sky. Zidane manages to grab Garnet as the ship breaks apart, the two of them tumbling through the air before crashing through the canopy of the evil forest, the impact cushioned by branches and luck in measures impossible to predict. They survive, battered but alive, finding themselves in a place where few dare to venture and fewer still return from unchanged. The evil forest lives up to its name in ways that defy rational explanation. The trees themselves seem animate with malevolent intent, their branches reaching like grasping fingers, their roots shifting beneath the earth to trip and entangle unwary travelers. The mist here is thick beyond measure, reducing visibility to arm's length in places, breeding monsters that attack with mindless aggression anything living that enters their domain. The forest feeds on those who die within its bounds, consuming their bodies and memories, incorporating them into itself in transformations both physical and spiritual. Tantalus scattered across the forest in the crash, some injured, all in immediate danger from the forest inhabitants and the environment itself. Zidane takes it upon himself to rescue his comrades, gathering the troop members one by one, while Garnet insists on helping, despite her complete lack of combat training or experience with the dangers lurking in the mist. She may be a princess, sheltered and naive about the world beyond castle walls, but she possesses courage and determination in abundance, refusing to hide in safety while others risk themselves on her behalf. Steiner, driven by duty and unable to accept his princess's choice to aid common thieves, follows Zidane and Garnet through the forest, despite his own considerable discomfort with the dangers surrounding them. Vivi, swept along by circumstances beyond his control, discovers in himself reserves of bravery he did not know existed, his magic proving invaluable in fighting the monsters that attack at every turn. Together, this unlikely group fights their way to the forest's heart, where they find Blank, one of Tantalus' most reliable members, trapped by the forest vines and slowly being petrified, transformed into living stone by some property of the forest itself. The process is horrifying to witness, Blank's desperate struggle to free himself gradually slowing as the petrification spreads up his limbs, his expressions of fear freezing into a permanent mask as the transformation completes. They lack the means to reverse the condition, lacking the rare item called Supersoft that can cure advanced petrification, and so they are forced to leave Blank behind with a promise to return once they have acquired what is needed to save him. Deeper still they venture, drawn by some instinct or perhaps the forest's own will, until they reach a clearing dominated by an enormous creature called Plant Brain, a grotesque amalgamation of vegetative and animal tissue that serves as the forest guardian, or perhaps its animating intelligence. The battle that follows tests them in ways none were prepared for, the Plant Brain wielding both physical attacks and magical assaults that leave them battered and exhausted. But they prevail through combination of Zidane's skill, with his distinctive twin daggers, Vivi's powerful fire magic that proves especially effective against the plant-based enemy, Steiner's armored defense, and Garnet's support, her healing abilities, manifesting instinctively, though she has never been trained in their use. As the Plant Brain falls, the entire forest shudders and begins to petrify, the same process that claimed Blank now consuming the trees themselves, transforming the evil forest into a frozen monument of stone that will never threaten travelers again. But their escape comes at a cost. The route back to Alexandria is blocked by the petrification, and the Prima Vista's wreckage offers no hope of flight. Their only option is to continue south, crossing through the ice cavern that will take them beyond the Mist Continent's normal boundaries and toward the kingdom of Lindblum. Before they depart, Garnet makes a decision that will define her journey going forward. She adopts an alias, taking the name Dagger after Zidane's weapon, claiming this identity as her own in an attempt to separate herself from her royal heritage and the expectations that come with the title of princess. She asks Zidane to teach her how to speak like common people, to help her blend in with those she will encounter on their journey, to transform herself from sheltered princess into someone capable of navigating the world on her own terms. It is a request that speaks to both her desperation to escape her mother's influence and her recognition that her previous existence has left her woefully unprepared for survival outside castle walls. The journey through the ice cavern proves challenging in ways different from the evil forest. Where the forest was warm and oppressive, the cavern is brutally cold, ice coating every surface and making footing treacherous. They encounter Black Waltz number 1 alongside a creature called Celian, the first of 3 constructs sent by Queen Brana to retrieve her daughter. The Black Waltz is a being of magic and malice that wields ice powers and demonstrates capabilities far beyond normal soldiers, while Celian serves as its guardian beast. The battle is desperate, but they prevail, and both the Black Waltz and its companion fall before their combined strength. But the appearance of these hunters confirms Garnet's fears. Her mother will not simply allow her to leave, will not accept her daughter's rebellion against Alexandria's throne. More hunters will come, each likely more dangerous than the last, and their journey has only just begun. They emerge from the ice cavern onto the plains above the mist line, where for the first time Dagger sees sky unpolluted by the perpetual fog, that has defined her entire existence until this moment. The sight of unobscured horizon, of clouds and sun, without the mist's interference, moves her to tears she cannot quite explain. It is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. This revelation of how much of the world has been hidden from her, how much she has missed living her entire life beneath that obscuring blanket. The emotional moment is brief, however, as they still have distance to cover before reaching safety, and Queen Bran's forces will not cease their pursuit simply because they have moved beyond Alexandria's immediate borders. The village of Dali appears peaceful when they arrive, a small farming community of windmills and simple homes where travelers can rest and resupply before continuing their journey. Dagger attempts to blend in with the locals, applying Zidane's lessons about common speech with mixed results that range from endearing to awkward. She addresses a shopkeeper with elaborate formality before catching herself, stumbling through sentences as she struggles to suppress years of royal training and linguistic precision. The villagers find her charming in her earnestness, unaware that they are speaking with the Princess of Alexandria, seeing only a young woman clearly out of her element, but trying her best to adapt. But Dali harbors secrets beneath its peaceful exterior. Vivi, wandering the village while the others rest, discovers something that shakes him to his core. Beneath one of the windmills lies a hidden factory, an underground facility manufacturing black mages, artificial beings identical to Vivi himself in their distinctive hats, glowing eyes, and ability to wield magic. He watches in horror as completed units are loaded onto a cargo ship bound for Alexandria, mindless automatons created for Queen Brana's army. Weapons given form, but not consciousness or will. The discovery forces Vivi to confront questions he has avoided his entire short life. If black mages are manufactured, does that mean he was manufactured as well? Is he simply a product like these soulless dolls being shipped to war? Does he possess genuine consciousness and free will? Or is he merely programmed to believe he does? The existential crisis hits him with the force of physical impact, his world tilting on its axis as foundations he never questioned crumble beneath examination. When he shares what he has discovered with the others, the implications are clear and disturbing. Queen Brana is not simply building a conventional army, but creating magical weapons, soldiers who feel no pain or fear, who can be produced in numbers limited only by resources and time, who will follow orders without question or hesitation. The black mages represent a military advantage that could upset the balance of power across the entire continent, giving Alexandria the means to conquer its neighbors with ruthless efficiency. Dagger realizes with growing horror that her mother's ambitions are even more dangerous than she had feared, that the weapons she had heard discussed in whispered conversations are not merely advanced technology, but living beings created solely for the purpose of war and death. They steal aboard the cargo ship carrying the latest batch of black mages to Alexandria, intending to use it to reach Lindblum, while simultaneously investigating the extent of Brana's black mage army. The journey begins quietly, the mindless black mage pilots unresponsive to their presence, continuing their programmed route without acknowledging the stowaways in their cargo hold, but their respite is short-lived. Black Waltz No. 2 attacks mid-journey, another of Bran's magical constructs seeking to reclaim the princess and eliminate anyone who has aided her escape. The battle damages the ship and reveals to Vivi just how different he is from these other black mages, how his fear and compassion and desperate desire to protect his new friends sets him apart from the empty shells that surround him. When Black Waltz No. 3 appears, the situation escalates from dangerous to catastrophic. This third construct is more powerful than its predecessors, more ruthless in its pursuit of its mission, and willing to sacrifice the entire ship and everyone aboard if necessary to complete its objective. The Black Mage pilots, those mindless automatons, who have simply followed their programming throughout the journey, attempt to defend Vivi when the Black Waltz targets him, recognizing perhaps some kinship even in their limited consciousness. But they are no match for the construct's power, and one by one they fall, their bodies crumbling as their magic sustains fatal damage. Vivi watches them die protecting him, watches these beings he had dismissed as empty shells demonstrate something approaching sacrifice, and the trauma of it breaks something inside him, even as it strengthens his resolve to matter, to use his existence for something beyond destruction and war. In the aftermath of the battle, with Black Waltz 3 defeated and the ship barely maintaining altitude, Dagger makes a choice that surprises everyone. When they reach the point where they must decide whether to attempt returning to Alexandria or continue toward Lindblum, she takes the ship's controls herself and steers them toward Lindblum, committing fully to her escape from her mother's reach. The ship crashes through the south gate that separates Alexandrian territory from Lindblum, barely maintaining enough altitude to clear the barrier, and limps toward the city that represents safety and allies and the possibility of stopping Bran's ambitions before they consume the continent in war. Lindblum welcomes them with the organized chaos of a nation preparing for conflict while maintaining the appearance of peace. The city rises in concentric tiers, each level connected by gondolas and lifts, the whole place thrumming with the energy of workshops and factories producing airships and machinery at accelerated pace. Regent Sid greets them personally, though his appearance causes considerable surprise. The ruler of Lindblum has been transformed into an oglop, a small insect-like creature, the result of a curse placed upon him by his wife Hildegard in retaliation for his infidelity. Despite his reduced circumstances, Sid's mind remains sharp, and he listens carefully as Dagger explains the situation in Alexandria, Queen Brana's descent into megalomania, and the danger posed by her Black Mage army. Sid reveals that he was the one who commissioned Tantalus to kidnap Garnet, recognizing that she was in danger and unable to act against Brana himself without triggering open war between their kingdoms. He offers Lindblum as sanctuary while they determine how to address the crisis, but he cannot mobilize his forces against Alexandria without justification that would satisfy his council and allies. To do so would brand him as the aggressor, potentially unifying other nations against Lindblum and destroying any moral authority he might claim in opposing Brana's expansion. They are left in a frustrating position, knowing that Brana poses a threat, but unable to act directly without triggering the very war they seek to prevent. The Festival of the Hunt provides brief respite from these weighty concerns, a traditional competition held annually in Lindblum, where participants compete to hunt monsters in the theatre district, earning points based on the danger and rarity of their quarry. Zidane, Vivi, and a new companion named Freya Crescent participate, each for their own reasons. Freya is a Burmesian dragon knight, her species' distinctive rat-like appearance marking her clearly as not human, her skill with a spear legendary even in Lindblum, where such things are known and respected. She's been wandering the world for years searching for her lost love, Sir Fratley, a fellow dragon knight who left one day and never returned, his memory of her apparently erased by some unknown cause or curse. Her quest has brought her to Lindblum repeatedly, always hoping for information, always disappointed by its absence. She and Zidane share an easy camaraderie born of their similar wandering lifestyles and combat skills, finding in each other a kindred spirit despite their vastly different backgrounds and motivations. The festival is interrupted by grim news. A Burmechian soldier arrives in Lindblum, badly wounded, bearing news that Queen Brana has invaded Burmechia with her Black Mage army. The kingdom is under siege, its capital city being systematically destroyed, its population fleeing before an enemy that shows neither mercy nor hesitation in its mission of conquest. Freya immediately prepares to return to her homeland, to fight in defense of her kingdom and people, duty overriding her personal quest for the first time in years. Zidane volunteers to accompany her, partially from genuine desire to help and partially from recognition that Brana's aggression must be stopped before it engulfs the entire continent. Vivi insists on joining them, driven by need to understand the black mages who look like him, who share his appearance but lack his consciousness, who are being used as weapons in a war that serves no purpose but one woman's ambition. They journey through Gizamaluka's grotto, an underground passage that connects Lindblum territory to Burmechia, following a route that takes them beneath mountains and through caverns where ancient creatures dwell in darkness. The journey is treacherous, filled with monsters and environmental hazards, but they press forward with desperate speed, knowing that every moment of delay means more destruction in Burmechia, more lives lost to Brana's invasion. When they finally emerge, the sight that greets them confirms their worst fears. The city of Burmechia is burning, its streets filled with casualties, buildings collapsing under assault from black mage fire magic, and survivors huddling in whatever shelter they can find from the relentless attack. The battle through Burmechia takes them from the city's lower levels to its highest reaches, fighting through Alexandrian soldiers and black mage units, witnessing firsthand the devastation wrought by Queen Brana's army. The Burmecian defenders are brave and skilled, their dragon knights legendary for good reason, but they are overwhelmed by numbers and the sheer magical firepower of the black mage assault. Every street tells a story of desperate resistance and inevitable defeat, of people who fought to the last to protect their homes and families, of a kingdom dying not through fair combat, but through overwhelming force applied without mercy or restraint. At the summit of the city's highest point, where the palace overlooks the ruins below, they encounter Queen Brana herself, her massive form dominating the space, her presence somehow both ridiculous and terrifying in equal measure. Beside her stands General Beatrix, greatest of Alexandria's military commanders, a woman whose reputation precedes her as perhaps the most skilled warrior on the entire continent. Her Save the Queen sword is legendary, her combat capabilities unmatched, and her loyalty to Queen Brana absolute. Also present is a figure none of them have seen before, a man with silver hair and effeminate features, dressed in elaborate clothing that speaks of wealth and vanity in equal measure. This is Kuja, though they do not yet know his name, and he watches the proceedings with an expression of amusement and calculation that suggests he is somehow orchestrating events from behind the scenes. Zidane, Freya, and Vivi attempt to stop the Queen's forces, to save what remains of Burmechia from complete destruction. But Beatrix defeats them with casual ease that is almost insulting. She is simply on another level entirely, her speed and skill making their own considerable abilities seem clumsy and amateurish by comparison. The defeat is comprehensive and humiliating, made worse by Beatrix's clear disdain for their efforts and her unwavering belief in the righteousness of Alexandria's cause. They are forced to retreat as Brana sets her sights on the next target. Clara, Burmechia's sister kingdom, the isolated settlement that has remained apart from continental politics for generations. Meanwhile, Dagger and Steiner undertake their own mission within Alexandria, attempting to find a way to cure Blank's petrification and hopefully gather information about Queen Bran's plans. They encounter Marcus, another member of Tantalus, who has remained in Alexandria working to rescue his friend, and together they infiltrate the home of Dr. Tot, Dagger's former tutor, who fled the castle when the Queen's behavior became too erratic to ignore. Tot provides them with the supersoft they need to save Blank and confirms Dagger's worst fears about her mother. Brana has been corrupted by Kuja's influence, her natural ambitions twisted and amplified until they have consumed everything else about her personality. She seeks power above all else, and Kuja has promised to provide it through eidolons, the legendary summoned creatures that exist in myth and children's stories, beings of incredible power that can be extracted from summoners who carry their essence. The revelation hits Dagger like a physical blow. She is a summoner, though she barely understands what that means, having had vague dreams of creatures responding to her call, but never pursuing or developing these abilities. Her royal pendant, which she has worn since childhood, is not merely jewelry, but a fragment of a summoning gem, a key to accessing eidolons that her mother has been seeking all along. She understands with sudden clarity that her mother's interest in capturing her goes beyond mere control of a wayward daughter. Brana intends to extract Dagger's eidolons, to steal the summoning power from her by force, to claim these legendary beings as weapons in her campaign of conquest. The realization transforms Dagger's understanding of her situation from political crisis to personal danger in the most immediate and physical sense. They use the Gargan Rue, an underground transport system utilizing giant gargants, creatures whose natural burrowing creates passages beneath the earth, to reach Alexandria directly from Treno. The journey is harrowing, the gargants barely controlled, the passages they traverse filled with dangers both natural and supernatural. They emerge in Alexandria only to be captured. Dagger brought before her mother while Marcus and Steiner are imprisoned, their attempt at infiltration having failed at the final stage. Brana does not waste time with explanations or justifications. She orders Zorn and Thorn, her court mages, and perhaps the most unsettling individuals in her service with their rhyming speech and identical appearances, to extract Dagger's eidolons by force, to literally tear the summoning power from her body, regardless of the pain or damage it might cause. The extraction process is agonizing, magical implements piercing Dagger's essence to reach the eidolons within, pulling them forth as Garnet screams in pain that is both physical and spiritual. She feels the creatures being torn away, beings that have existed within her since before memory, connections severed with all the trauma of amputation. Brana claims the eidolons for herself, their power now hers to command, and prepares to unleash them against Clara to complete what she began in Bermetia. Dagger is left broken and traumatized, barely conscious, the violation of the extraction leaving scars that will take far longer to heal than physical wounds. Zidane, Freya, and Vivi, having learned of Bran's next target, race to Clara to warn them and hopefully organize a defense that might succeed where Bermecius failed. The journey to Clara requires navigating the sandstorm that protects its borders, a magical barrier that Freya knows how to traverse, but which proves treacherous even with guidance. They arrive to find the city preparing for celebration rather than war. The people gathered for a traditional dance festival, unaware that their isolation is about to be shattered by violence they believed their defenses made impossible. Freya tries to convince the high priest and city's leaders of the danger, but they are dismissive, confident that the sandstorm will protect them as it has for centuries. Their faith in the barrier's strength is absolute, built on generations of safety, and they cannot conceive of a threat that could penetrate defenses that have never failed. But Brana does not attack conventionally. She does not send armies through the sandstorm or attempt to breach the magical barrier through force. Instead, she summons Odin, one of the eidolons stolen from Dagger, and commands it to destroy the barrier itself. The legendary summon manifests as an enormous armored figure on horseback, its blade cleaving through the sandstorm with a single strike that severs the magical connections maintaining the barrier. The protection that has kept Clara safe for generations vanishes in an instant, leaving the city exposed and vulnerable. Alexandrian forces pour through the collapsed barrier, black mages and soldiers flooding into Clara as the festival transforms into massacre. The defenders fight back with desperate courage, dragon knights launching themselves from the trees' platforms to engage the invaders in mid-air combat, civilians fleeing toward whatever shelter the city provides, priests attempting to restore the barrier even as its foundations crumble beneath magical assault. Zidane, Freya and Vivi join the defense, fighting through wave after wave of attackers, trying to stem a tide that cannot be stopped through individual heroism, no matter how skillfully executed. They ascend the great tree, fighting their way toward the summit, where Bran herself directs the assault, where they hope to confront her directly and perhaps end this destruction before Clara suffers Bermekia's complete annihilation. At the top, they face Beatrix once more, the general standing between them and any hope of stopping the Queen's rampage. The battle is as one-sided as their previous encounter, Beatrix demonstrating once again why her reputation is deserved, her skill with Save the Queen making their combined efforts seem inadequate and clumsy. She defeats them without apparent effort, leaving them battered and demoralized as Brana completes her true objective. The Queen has come not merely to destroy Clara, but to claim a jewel held in the city's temple, a summoning gem containing the Eidolon Alexander, perhaps the most powerful defensive summon in existence. With this prize secured and Clara's defenses shattered, Brana orders the great tree itself destroyed. The Eidolon Atomos is summoned, a grotesque creature that manifests as an enormous mouth and eye, its power to consume rather than destroy conventionally. Atomos creates a gravitational vortex that pulls everything toward its maw, the entire city beginning to collapse inward as the great tree splinters and breaks, platforms tearing loose and spiraling into that consuming darkness. People scream as they fall, buildings disintegrate, and centuries of Burmesian culture preserved in Clara are obliterated in minutes. Freya watches her people's sister kingdom destroyed, the last stronghold of their shared heritage reduced to nothing, and something inside her breaks alongside Clara's fall. She has been searching for her lost love for years, chasing a memory across the world. But at this moment, all that matters is the death of her people, the systematic extinction of everything she knows and values. Her grief is absolute and paralyzing, rendering her nearly catatonic with the weight of loss too profound to process. Zidane and Vivi drag her from the collapsing tree, escaping aboard an Alexandrian airship in the chaos, barely surviving as Clara falls completely, and the great tree becomes nothing more than a broken husk, rising from the desert. They return to Lindblum carrying news of Clara's destruction and Brana's acquisition of Dagger's Eidolons. Regent Sid receives the reports with grave concern, recognizing that the situation has escalated beyond anything diplomatic solutions can address. Brana now commands multiple legendary summons, giving her military capabilities that no conventional army can hope to counter. If she moves against Lindblum directly, the city-state lacks the means to defend itself, and if she turns her Eidolons loose across the continent, No kingdom will be safe from her ambitions. The alliance that might have contained her aggression has been shattered by Burmecha's fall, and Clyra's destruction has sent shockwaves through every nation as they realize their own vulnerability to similar attacks. But before they can formulate any response, news arrives of a gathering at Alexandria Castle. Brana is hosting a ceremony, inviting dignitaries and nobles from across the continent to witness what she claims will be a demonstration of Alexandria's power and a declaration of a new order for Gaia. The invitation is transparently a trap, an opportunity for Brana to eliminate potential opposition while they are gathered in one place, but it also presents an opportunity to infiltrate the castle and potentially rescue Dagger. Siad organizes a team for this infiltration: Zidane, Freya, Vivi, and a newcomer named Queen Quen, a coup whose obsessive interest in food and cooking has led them to join Zidane's party in hopes of tasting new and exotic dishes across the world. Kina is unusual, their gender ambiguous, their priorities seemingly divorced from anything resembling conventional concerns, their combat abilities consisting of eating enemies and then utilizing their techniques in battle. But they are surprisingly effective despite their eccentric nature, and their enthusiasm provides levity in situations that might otherwise be overwhelmingly grim. The infiltration of Alexandria Castle proceeds through a combination of stealth, disguise, and exploiting the chaos of Brana's ceremony preparations. They discover Dagger imprisoned in the castle, traumatized by the extraction but alive, and Steiner, who has been held separately after his capture. The reunion is emotional, Dagger barely able to speak of what was done to her, the violation of having her eidolons torn away, leaving psychological scars that words cannot adequately convey. But there is no time for proper processing of trauma. They must escape before Brana realizes her daughter has been freed and the full weight of Alexandria's military descends upon them. Their escape route takes them through the castle's lower levels, through passages that Dagger knows from childhood exploration, toward the harbour where Lindblum ships are docked for the ceremony. But they are intercepted by Zorn and Thorn, the grotesque twins who served as instruments of Dagger's torture. And behind them appears Kuja, for the first time speaking directly to the party. He is charming and theatrical, his manner suggesting someone playing a game where he alone knows all the rules, and he engages Zidane in conversation that reveals disturbing familiarity. Kuja knows things about Zidane that even Zidane does not know about himself, references their shared origins in ways that make no sense, speaks of Zidane's tale as marking him as something significant rather than merely unusual. The encounter is brief, Kuja withdrawing with enigmatic comments about future meetings, but it plants seeds of doubt and confusion that will grow throughout the journey ahead. They escape aboard a Lindblum cargo ship, fleeing Alexandria as Brana's forces pursue, and for a brief moment it seems they have succeeded. Then Queen Brana summons Bahamut, the king of dragons, perhaps the most powerful offensive eidolon in existence. The legendary summon manifests above the fleet, its massive draconic form blotting out the sky, and unleashes mega flare upon the assembled ships. The attack is catastrophic, entire vessels vaporizing under the assault, crews burning or drowning as their ships break apart beneath them, the sky itself seeming to tear under the force of Bahamut's power. The cargo ship, Zidane's party, is hit, explosions tearing through its hull, fires spreading faster than they can be contained, and the vessel begins to plummet from the sky toward the ocean below. They crash into the sea, the impact violent enough to knock several of them unconscious, the ship breaking apart as it sinks beneath the waves. Zidane wakes on a beach, battered and disoriented, finding his companions scattered along the shoreline, some injured but all alive through fortune that feels increasingly improbable. They have been washed up on the outer continent, far from any territory they know, without means of immediate return to Lindblum, or resources to mount any kind of organized resistance against Brana. They are refugees now, survivors of a massacre, forced to rebuild from nothing, while the queen they oppose consolidates her power and prepares for whatever comes next in her campaign of conquest. The outer continent presents a landscape vastly different from the mist continent they know. Here the mist is largely absent, the air clear and vision extending to distant horizons, the ecosystem less monster-infested, and the environment more hospitable to travel. They make their way inland searching for civilization, or at least shelter, and eventually discover a small village at the base of a mountain. This is Madain-Sari, or rather what remains of it, a settlement that was clearly once much larger, but now consists of only a handful of intact buildings amid extensive ruins. The architecture is distinctive, incorporating elements of summoner culture that Dagger recognizes from half-remembered dreams and fragments of early childhood memory. Living in Madain-Sari is a young girl named Aiko Carroll, 6 years old according to her own cheerful assertion, though her maturity suggests she may be slightly older than she claims. She lives alone with her Mughal friends, having survived in the ruins since she was an infant, when tragedy struck the village and killed everyone else. Aiko is a summoner, the last of her kind save for Dagger herself, possessing eidolons and the ability to call them, though her control is imperfect and her understanding incomplete. She has been isolated her entire conscious life, creating an existence from what the ruins provide and the stories her Mughals tell her, developing a personality that is simultaneously childishly enthusiastic and unexpectedly competent in survival skills. Her first sight of Zidane triggers immediate infatuation, the child having never seen anyone outside her Mughal companions, and she declares with absolute certainty that she intends to marry him, a proclamation that Zidane finds both amusing and deeply awkward. Aiko explains what she knows of Madain-Sari's history, stories passed down from her grandfather, who raised her until his death when she was still very young. The summoner tribe lived here for generations in relative isolation, their abilities making them valuable but also dangerous in the eyes of those who might seek to exploit them. 10 years ago, a catastrophe struck the village, monsters appearing suddenly in overwhelming numbers and slaughtering the inhabitants, sparing only infant Aiko through circumstances she does not fully understand. The ruins have been her home since, the ghosts of her people's history surrounding her, and she has created a life that is lonely but functional, waiting without quite knowing what she waits for. Dagger feels a connection to this place that transcends conscious memory, the architecture and symbols triggering recognition she cannot explain. Aiko reveals that Dagger is not native to Alexandria, that she came from Madain-Sari originally, though the circumstances of her departure and arrival in Alexandria remain unclear. The revelation shakes Dagger's understanding of her identity. If she is not truly of Alexandrian royal blood, if her earliest memories are false or missing, then who is she really? What happened in her early childhood that brought her from this ruined summoner village to the heart of Alexandria's royal family? The questions multiply faster than answers can be found, and Dagger realizes that her identity crisis mirrors in some ways what Vivi has been experiencing. Both of them forced to confront that their understanding of themselves rests on foundations less stable than they believed. Aiko joins their party, partially because she is desperate for companionship after years of isolation, and partially because she recognizes that events are in motion, that concern summoners directly. She knows of the Aoife tree, a massive growth on the forgotten continent that has always been forbidden territory, a place her people warned against approaching without explaining exactly why. Recent disturbances have drawn her attention to it, suggestions that something is changing or awakening, and she believes they must investigate, even though none of them are quite sure what they will find there. The journey to the forgotten continent requires passage through the Conde Petit mountain, a region inhabited by dwarves who maintain isolationist policies almost as stringent as Clarus were. They gain passage through combination of diplomacy, luck, and Icos enthusiasm overwhelming the dwarves' objections, and travel through the mountain to Black Mage Village, a settlement that changes everything Vivi thought he understood about his existence. Black Mage Village is home to dozens of black mages identical to Vivi in appearance, the manufactured soldiers who have gained consciousness and escaped from Queen Bran's service to build lives of their own. They have created a community in this remote location, learning to farm and craft and exist beyond their original purpose as weapons. They speak of discovering themselves, of realizing they were more than tools, of choosing to flee rather than continue serving in a war they did not understand or support. They accept Vivi as one of their own immediately, welcoming him into their community without question or judgment, offering him the belonging he has craved since discovering his nature in Dallas Factory. But the village carries the shadows beneath its hopeful surface. The black mages are discovering that their lifespans are limited, that whatever process created them did not grant normal longevity. Some have already stopped, their bodies ceasing to function with no warning or illness, simply ending as though a switch was flipped. The remaining mages live with the knowledge that they may have only months or perhaps weeks remaining, that their consciousness and individuality will end not through natural death, but through the failure of whatever artificial systems animate them. The revelation devastates Vivi, forcing him to confront not just abstract questions of his nature, but the concrete reality that he may have very little time to matter, to make his existence significant, to justify the consciousness he has been granted. One of the black mages in the village is number 288, who shares with Vivi a memory of being in a place before the village, a facility where they were created and first awakened. Number 288 does not fully understand the memory, but it troubles him, suggests that their origins may be even more complex than they realized. Vivi finds himself torn between the comfort of finally finding people like him and the horror of understanding that they are all temporary, living on borrowed time with expiration dates they cannot predict or prevent. The party continues to the Aoife tree, following Aiko's insistence that something there demands investigation. The tree is massive beyond description, its trunk wider than castles, its roots delving deep into the earth, its canopy lost in clouds and distance. The area around it feels wrong in ways difficult to articulate, the air itself seeming heavy and oppressive, wildlife absent or mutated into aggressive forms that attack on sight. They descend into the tree's interior, following passages that lead downward through the trunk and into the root system, discovering architecture and design that suggests the tree is not entirely natural, but has been shaped or modified by intelligent hands for purposes unknown. Deep within the Aoife tree, they discover its true function. The tree is a misgeneration facility, its roots tapping into the planet's core to draw forth souls that should be returning to the natural cycle, perverting them into the mist that blankets the mist continent. For generations, perhaps centuries, the Aoife tree has been poisoning Gaia's natural life cycle, preventing souls from returning properly and creating the fog that breeds monsters and limits civilization. The revelation recontextualizes everything they know about their world. The mist is not natural but artificial, a symptom of interference with the planet's fundamental processes, and its persistence suggests ongoing operation rather than ancient malfunction. They battle through the tree's guardians and defenses, fighting creatures that have been twisted by exposure to concentrated mist and corrupted souls. With persistence and coordination, they are able to temporarily shut down the mist generation, stopping the flow that feeds the phenomenon. But they realize quickly that this is not a permanent solution. The tree will reactivate on its own, and destroying it completely is beyond their current capabilities. They have bought time and discovered truth, but solutions remain elusive, and the questions multiply with each answer they uncover. As they emerge from the ether tree, they witness Queen Brana's fleet approaching, a massive force of Alexandrian warships bristling with weapons and carrying her black mage army. But Bran has not come to attack Lindblum or any other conventional target. She has come to the outer continent chasing Kuja, having apparently decided that her supplier of military technology and Eidolon extraction techniques has outlived his usefulness and now represents a threat to be eliminated. The betrayal works both ways. Kuja, having his own agenda that no longer aligns with serving Alexandria's ambitions. The confrontation between Brana and Kuja takes place in the air above the outer continent. Eidolons summoned and devastating magical attacks exchanged, the sky itself becoming a battlefield that rearranges geography with its violence. Brana summons Atomos, Odin, and Bahamut in succession, the legendary creatures manifesting to attack Kuja's forces with power that has destroyed kingdoms. But Kuja has his own trump card, a silver dragon of enormous size and power that he rides with casual grace. This creature, known as the Silver Dragon, matches the Eidolons despite lacking their legendary status, its attacks coordinated with Kuja's own considerable magical abilities. The battle seems evenly matched until Kuja reveals that he has been studying the Eidolons, learning their nature, and developing means to turn them against their summoner. He seizes control of Brana's Eidolons, turning them against the queen herself, the legendary summons she stole from Dagger, now instruments of her own destruction. The irony is not lost on anyone watching, but there is no satisfaction in seeing justice served when the consequences are so catastrophic. Bahamut unleashes Mega Flare directly at Brana's flagship, the same attack that destroyed Lindblum's fleet, now turned against Alexandria. The ship explodes in a fireball visible for miles, pieces of it raining down across the landscape, and Queen Bran dies in the destruction. Her ambitions ended, but her crimes leaving scars that will take generations to heal. In her final moments, as her ship falls from the sky, and she lies dying in the wreckage, Brana experiences clarity that has eluded her for months. The corruption that transformed her from caring mother to monster seems to lift, and she calls out for Garnet, her daughter, with genuine maternal concern replacing the cold calculation that has defined her recent actions. Dagger, racing to the crash site, arrives in time to hold her mother as she dies, to hear Brana's apology and confession of love, to receive closure that feels inadequate given everything that has happened, but is more than many receive when losing parents to such circumstances. Brana's death does not undo the destruction she caused, does not restore Bermecia or Clara or the countless lives lost to her conquest, but it ends the immediate threat she represented and forces Dagger to confront her role as Alexandria's heir. With Queen Brana dead, Princess Garnet becomes Queen Garnet, till Alexandros the 16th, ruler of Alexandria, and responsible for repairing the damage her mother inflicted upon the continent. She returns to Alexandria for a coronation that is more wake than celebration, the kingdom mourning their queen's death, while simultaneously processing the atrocities committed in her name. The ceremony is somber, the crown heavy with implications beyond its physical weight, and Garnet stands before her people, wearing a title she never wanted, and bearing responsibility for crimes she actively opposed. But she accepts the burden because someone must, because Alexandria needs leadership and guidance to navigate the aftermath of Brana's war, and because she cannot in good conscience abandon her people to chaos simply because the situation is difficult and painful. The coronation is interrupted by Kuja, who appears with theatrical flair to announce that while Brana is dead, he is not finished with Alexandria or Garnet. He reveals that he was responsible for corrupting Brana, for feeding her ambitions and providing the means to pursue them, all in service of his own agenda. He speaks in riddles and half-truths, references plans within plans, and makes clear that he views Garnet and her companions as pieces in a game whose full scope they cannot yet comprehend. He departs with ominous promises of future encounters, leaving them frustrated by their inability to stop him and uncertain what his ultimate objectives might be. Garnet cannot simply abandon her queenly duties to chase Kuja, much as she might want to see him brought to justice for his role in recent tragedies. She must remain in Alexandria to govern, to make decisions that affect millions, to demonstrate that the kingdom has stable leadership after Bran's destructive reign. So Zidane and the others depart without her, following leads on Kuja's whereabouts, trying to understand his plans and hopefully prevent whatever catastrophe he is orchestrating. Their investigation leads them to discover that Kuja has a base of operations in a desert palace on the outer continent, a lavish structure that seems designed more for theatrical effect than practical defense. They infiltrate the palace, fight through guardians and traps, and confront Kuja in his throne room. But the confrontation goes poorly. Kuja demonstrates magical power that dwarfs anything they have encountered, casually defeating them while barely paying attention to the battle, treating their efforts as minor inconvenience rather than genuine threat. He traps them in a cell beneath the palace, intending to kill them at his leisure once he completes his current projects. Imprisonment provides opportunity for conversation and reflection. Zidane, Vivi, Freya, Steiner, Quina, Aiko, and a new companion named Amaranth Coral, who joined the party seeking to defeat Zidane in combat, only to find himself grudgingly respecting the thief, find themselves forced to wait while Kuja decides their fate. The enforced downtime allows for deeper conversations than their constant travel and fighting usually permit, moments of vulnerability and honesty that build connections beyond mere alliance. Vivi speaks about his fears regarding his limited lifespan, about wanting to matter, but not knowing how to make his brief existence significant. Freya discusses Fratly and the pain of loving someone who no longer remembers you, who looks at you with no recognition despite your shared history. Steiner processes his crisis of loyalty, having devoted his life to serving a throne that was occupied by a monster, now uncertain whether his rigid adherence to duty made him complicit in atrocities he should have opposed. Each character carries burdens and questions, and the conversations reveal depths that action sequences and plot advancement often overshadow. They escape through combination of cleverness and assistance from Hilda, Regent Sid's wife, who has also been imprisoned by Kuja. She has information about Kuja's plans, having been captured while investigating the connection between his activities and the mist phenomenon. Together they flee the desert palace, making their way back to Lindblum, where Kid has been working on solutions to multiple problems simultaneously, developing airships capable of traveling beyond the mist, researching ways to permanently shut down the ether tree, and gathering intelligence on Kuja's true nature and origins. The party regroups in Lindblum, sharing information and attempting to piece together the larger picture of what is happening on Gaia. Several things become clear through their combined knowledge. Kuja has been manipulating events across the continent for years, not merely the recent months of Brana's aggression. The Black Mages are his creation, manufactured in facilities he controls and sold to Bran as weapons. The mist serves his purposes somehow, though the exact connection remains unclear. And most disturbingly, he seems to have specific interest in Zidane, treating him as significant beyond merely being an obstacle to his plans. They learn that Kuja has been collecting eidolons, seeking summoning gems and summoners to harvest their power. With Brana dead and Dagger protected in Alexandria, only Aiko remains as an accessible target, and indeed, Kuja soon makes his move to Madainsari. The party races to intercept him, desperate to protect Aiko from the same extraction torture that Dagger endured. When they arrive, Kuja is already there, his presence dominating the ruined village, his intentions clear and terrible. The confrontation escalates quickly. Kuja attempts to extract Aiko's eidolons, seeking to claim her summoning power for his own purposes. But before he can complete the process, both Aiko and Garnet, acting in desperate synchronicity, combine their remaining summoning abilities to call forth Alexander. The legendary defensive eidolon responds to their joint prayer, manifesting over Madainsari as an enormous castle fortress, a structure of pure light and holy power that radiates protection and judgment in equal measure. Alexander is perhaps the most powerful defensive summon in existence, and its appearance shifts the balance of the confrontation dramatically. Kuja recognizes the threat immediately and attempts to seize control of Alexander as he has done with other eidolons, seeking to turn this defensive power to his own purposes. He begins the process of subjugation, his magic wrapping around Alexander's essence, attempting to override the summoner's control and bind the eidolon to his will. For a moment, it seems he might succeed, his considerable power proving sufficient to overwhelm the joint summoning of two inexperienced summoners. But before Kuja can complete Alexander's subjugation, reality tears open above them. A massive airship emerges from the dimensional rift, a vessel unlike anything seen on Gaia, its design suggesting both advanced technology and something almost organic in its construction. This is the Invincible, and piloting it is an elderly figure who introduces himself as Garland. He speaks with calm authority, addressing Kuja as one addresses a wayward subordinate, asserting control that suggests the silver-haired man is merely a tool rather than an independent agent. Garland's arrival changes everything. He overrides Kuja's attempted subjugation of Alexander with contemptuous ease, demonstrating mastery of forces that dwarf even Kuja's considerable abilities. Then, with cold calculation, he directs the Invincible to fire upon Alexander. The airship's weapon is no conventional cannon, but something designed specifically to destroy eidolons, a beam of energy that tears through Alexander's defenses and shatters the legendary summon into fragments of light that rain down across Madainsari like falling stars. Aiko screams as Alexander is destroyed, feeling the eidolon's death as a personal wound, the connection between summoner and summon, severed violently and permanently. Garnet, too, feels the loss, having contributed her power to the summoning and now experiencing its catastrophic failure. The destruction of Alexander demonstrates that even legendary eidolons can be defeated, that the powers they have relied upon throughout their journey are insufficient against threats operating on Garland's level. Garland addresses the assembled witnesses with measured certainty, explaining that their interference with his plans has become inconvenient and must be addressed. He speaks of Kuja as a failed experiment, a tool that has exceeded its parameters and must be retired. He references Terra, a place none of them have heard of, with implications that it represents his origin and base of operations. Then, as suddenly as he arrived, Garland departs aboard the Invincible, taking Kuja with him despite the latter's rage and resistance, leaving the party standing in Madainsari's ruins with the shattered fragments of Alexander as evidence that they face threats beyond anything they imagined. The revelation that there are forces operating on Gaia with agendas spanning decades or longer, with capabilities that dwarf even legendary eidolons, forces complete reconsideration of everything they thought they understood. This is not a conflict between kingdoms or a single madman's ambition. This is something larger, older, more complex, and they are caught in currents whose full scope remains hidden from their view. Regent Sid completes work on the Hildegard III, an airship designed specifically to operate beyond the limitations that ground most vessels to the Mist Continent. With this ship, they can travel to the Forgotten Continent and beyond, can pursue Garland and Kuja to wherever Terra might be located, can finally take the initiative rather than constantly reacting to attacks and crises. The ship represents hope and capability, the means to expand their understanding beyond the borders that have constrained them, and they depart Lindblum with renewed purpose despite the overwhelming nature of the opposition they face. Their journey takes them first to the Shimmering Island, a location that houses ancient ruins containing glyphs and murals that provide context for understanding Gaia's hidden history. The ruins depict two worlds, two planets, existing in parallel, or perhaps in sequence. One world thriving and alive, the other dying and desperate. The images suggest a cycle of death and rebirth, of one world consuming another to extend its own existence, a parasitic relationship dressed in the language of necessity and survival. The implications are staggering, suggesting that Gaia's history extends far deeper than anyone realized, and that current events are the latest chapter in a conflict that has been ongoing for millennia. They follow leads to the village of Estogaza on the Lost Continent, a settlement built around ancient ruins that seem to predate human habitation of Gaia. Here they encounter merchants and travelers who speak of strange phenomena, of ruins that seem to shift and change, of passages that lead to places that should not exist. Following these rumors, they discover a portal, a gateway that leads not to another location on Gaia, but to somewhere else entirely, somewhere that feels wrong in fundamental ways that have nothing to do with danger and everything to do with basic wrongness of existence. They step through the portal and emerge on Terra, a dying world of blue crystal and fading light, a place where time seems to flow differently and reality itself feels thin and fragile. The sky is the wrong color. The architecture follows geometries that hurt to look at directly, and the air tastes of entropy and despair. This is a world in its death throes, a planet that has exhausted its life force and now exists in a state between life and death, sustained only by parasitic connection to Gaia and the souls it steals through the ether tree. Terra is not native to this reality, or perhaps it is too native. The original world before something went wrong and it began dying. The inhabitants they encounter are genomes, beings that appear humanoid but lack distinct features, their faces smooth and expressions absent, moving with mechanical precision that suggests limited consciousness, or perhaps consciousness so different from human that it appears as blankness. The genomes are vessels waiting to be filled, containers prepared to house Terran souls, when those souls can finally be transferred completely from their dying world to the vitality of Gaia. Garland rules Terra from a structure called Pandemonium, a floating palace of impossible architecture that serves as headquarters for his centuries-long plan. They infiltrate the palace, fight through its guardians and traps, and finally confront Garland directly in his throne room. He greets them without apparent concern, treating their arrival as expected rather than threatening, and begins to explain the truth of Gaia's and Terra's relationship with the calm certainty of someone who has long since moved beyond concerns about opposition or judgment. Terra was dying, Garland explains, its life cycle interrupted by catastrophe or perhaps simple exhaustion of resources, the planet moving toward inevitable extinction. But rather than accept death, the Terrans developed a plan to preserve themselves by merging with another world, by finding a planet still vital and alive, and gradually replacing its population with their own souls in a process that would take generations to complete. They selected Gaia, a vibrant world with abundant life, and positioned Terra in dimensional proximity to begin the assimilation process. The Ether Tree is Garland's creation, a tool to disrupt Gaia's natural soul cycle by preventing proper reincarnation, creating a backlog of souls that generates the mist and slowly weakens Gaia's resistance to Terran intrusion. The genomes are vessels prepared to receive Terran souls, artificial bodies created specifically to house consciousnesses transferred from Terra's dying form. And Kuja, along with Zidane himself, are what Garland calls angels of death, artificial beings created with purpose, to extinguish Gaian life in preparation for Terran replacement. The revelation hits Zidane with the force of physical impact. He is not a person in any natural sense, but a manufactured weapon, created by Garland to serve as instrument of genocide, designed specifically to kill efficiently and without mercy or hesitation. His tale marks him as one of Garland's creations, his very existence a crime against the world he has been traveling across and the people he has been trying to protect. Everything he thought he knew about himself, every assumption about his origins and purpose, crumbles under the weight of Garland's casual explanation of his true nature. Kuja appears then, having escaped whatever restraints Garland placed upon him, and reveals why he has been acting against Garland's plan despite being its intended instrument. He is the prototype, the first angel of death, created before Zidane with the same purpose, but lacking certain refinements. Most critically, Kuja was designed with a limited lifespan, a built-in expiration date beyond which he will cease to function, and discovering this truth drove him to rebellion against his creator. He has been pursuing his own agenda, not from altruism, but from desperate desire to transcend his programming, to find a way to extend his existence beyond the limits Garland imposed, to become truly immortal, rather than a temporary tool discarded when no longer needed. The confrontation between Garland Kuja and Zidane's party becomes three-way conflict as allegiances and objectives collide. Garland represents Terra's interests and the cold logic of species survival through any means necessary. Kuja fights for his own continued existence and freedom from designed obsolescence, and Zidane's group opposes the entire paradigm, refusing to accept that one world's survival must come at the cost of another's complete extinction, rejecting the utilitarian calculus that treats genocide as acceptable when dressed in language of necessity. The battle is desperate and confused, magical energies tearing through Pandemonium's impossible architecture, reality itself seeming to strain under the forces being unleashed. Garland proves formidable despite his elderly appearance, his mastery of Terra's power, giving him capabilities that seem almost godlike within this realm. But he has underestimated Kuja's development beyond his original parameters, the prototype Angel having grown and evolved in ways Garland neither intended nor predicted. Kuja turns his full force against his creator, attacks fueled by years of resentment and the desperate knowledge that he is running out of time. When Garland falls before the onslaught, revealing in his final moments the truth that Kuja has been avoiding, the revelation proves catastrophic. Kuja learns definitively that his lifespan is nearly exhausted, that despite all his efforts and schemes, he will soon cease to function according to the limitations built into his creation. The knowledge hits him with overwhelming force, triggering an emotional surge so intense that it breaks through the barriers of his consciousness. In that moment of absolute despair and rage, Kuja achieves trance. His form transforms, his clothing shifting to more elaborate and revealing designs, his entire being radiating power that transcends his original specifications. The trance state represents the ultimate expression of conscious potential, achieved when emotion overflows normal containment, and Kuja has finally accessed it through the intensity of his reaction to impending mortality. He has transcended Garland's designs, achieved a state that should have been impossible for an artificial being. But the victory is hollow, because it comes too late to save him from the death he now knows is imminent. With Garland's defeat, the truth of Zidane's nature is laid bare for all his companions to witness. He is not naturally born, but artificially created, a weapon designed to commit atrocities. His very existence an affront to the world he has grown to love. The knowledge paralyzes him with guilt and horror, his sense of identity shattering under the realization that he was meant to be a monster, that his friendships and relationships are built on a foundation of lies about his fundamental nature. He retreats inward, unable to process the revelation, unable to face his companions knowing what he was created to do to them and their world. The crisis mirrors what Vivi experienced in Black Mage Village, discovering the truth of artificial creation and limited existence, but magnified by the addition of genocidal purpose. Where Vivi learned he was manufactured and might have little time remaining, Zidane learns he was manufactured specifically to exterminate all life on Gaia. The parallel is not lost on Vivi himself, who recognizes in Zidane's breakdown the same existential horror he felt when confronting his own nature. His friends refuse to abandon him to this crisis. Each in turn approaches Zidane, speaks to him, reminds him that what he was created for matters less than what he has chosen to become. Vivi, confronting his own artificial nature and limited lifespan, tells Zidane that being manufactured does not make you less real, that consciousness and choice define personhood more than origin or design. He speaks with the authority of someone who has already walked this path, who has already confronted the horror of artificial existence and found reasons to continue anyway. His words carry weight precisely because he understands the specific nature of Zidane's crisis in ways the naturally born cannot. Dagger points out that she, too, has discovered her identity is not what she believed, that she came from Madinsari rather than Alexandrian royalty, but that this does not invalidate the person she has become or the relationships she has built. Freya speaks of how memory and history can be stolen or altered, but the bonds formed through shared struggle persist regardless. Steiner acknowledges that duty and loyalty can be misplaced, that serving wrong causes does not define you if you recognize the error and choose differently going forward. Through these conversations, Zidane begins to understand what his companions have been trying to teach him throughout their journey. You are not defined by your past or your origins, but by your choices in the present. What you were created to be matters less than what you decide to become. He has spent the entire journey helping people, opposing injustice, protecting the weak, choosing compassion over expediency at every turn. Those choices define him far more than Garland's intentions when creating him. He is not Garland's weapon, but his own person, forged through experience and relationships rather than simply assembled for a purpose. The realization does not erase the pain of learning his true nature, but it provides foundation for moving forward. Zidane accepts that he is artificial, but refuses to let that artificiality define his worth or potential. He rejoins his companions with renewed purpose, understanding that they face not just Kuja, but the entire paradigm of terror-consuming Gaia, and that stopping this process requires confronting forces that transcend individual power or heroism. But their victory over Garland and Kuja's transformation into his trance state proves Pyrrhic. With Garland defeated and Kuja now wielding power beyond anything they have encountered, enhanced by trance and driven by the desperate knowledge that he is dying, the situation becomes more dangerous than ever. Kuja's newfound power does not bring him peace or acceptance, but rather amplifies his rage at the injustice of his limited existence. If he must die, if he cannot escape the fate Garland designed for him despite achieving transcendence, then he will take everything with him into oblivion. He has studied souls and existence itself, researched the fundamental forces that animate reality, and he knows where to strike to cause maximum damage. Kuja travels to Alexandria, the city that has suffered so much already, and prepares to demonstrate the full extent of his trance-enhanced power. Queen Garnet, ruling from the castle, has been expecting some form of retaliation since learning of events in Terra, and she has prepared the kingdom's defenses as circumstances allow. The city's military stands ready, its magical protections activated, but everyone recognizes that conventional defenses will likely prove insufficient against someone who has transcended normal limitations of power. The attack begins from the skies above Alexandria. Kuja does not arrive alone, but brings with him Bahamut, having seized control of the King of Dragons through methods he learned from studying Eidolon nature in Garland's archives. The legendary summon appears over the city, its massive draconic form blotting out the sun, and Kuja directs it to attack with all its considerable power. Bahamut unleashes devastating magical assaults upon Alexandria's defenses, its attacks tearing through barriers and fortifications that were designed to withstand conventional sieges, but cannot stand against Eidolon-level power, wielded with malicious intent. Garnet and Aiko, recognizing that only Eidolon power can counter an Eidolon, make a desperate decision. Despite the trauma of their previous failed summoning and Alexander's destruction at Madainsari, they attempt once more to call forth the legendary defensive summon. Working together, pooling their combined summoning abilities, and drawing on reserves of strength they did not know they possessed, they managed to manifest Alexander once more over Alexandria. The castle fortress of light appears in the sky, its holy radiance a beacon of hope against the darkness of Kuja's assault. Alexander moves to counter Bahamut, the two Eidolons engaging in aerial combat that shakes the foundations of the city below. The defensive summon proves capable of matching Bahamut's offensive power, its barriers and judgment attacks forcing the dragon Eidolon back, creating the possibility that Alexandria might be saved after all. For a moment, hope surges through the defenders watching from below. The belief that their queen and the young summoner have found the means to protect them from destruction. But Kuja, having learned from his previous encounter with Alexander, has prepared counters to its abilities. He does not attempt to seize control of the Eidolon directly, having seen that approach fail when Garland intervened. Instead, he manipulates Bahamut with greater precision, using his trance-enhanced control to coordinate attacks that specifically target Alexander's weaknesses, gradually overwhelming the defensive summon's protections through calculated assault rather than brute force. As Alexander begins to falter under the sustained attack, the Invincible appears in the sky above Alexandria. The massive airship, now apparently operating under its own intelligence, or perhaps following final commands Garland implanted before his death, positions itself with cold precision. The vessel's main weapon, the same devastating cannon that destroyed Alexander at Maden Sari, charges with visible energy buildup that casts ominous light across the entire city. The Invincible fires. The beam strikes both Alexander and Bahamut, the weapon designed to destroy Eidolons, making no distinction between summons serving different purposes. Both legendary creatures shatter under the assault, fragmenting into particles of light that rain down across Alexandria like deadly snow. The destruction is complete and catastrophic. The two most powerful Eidolons eliminated in a single devastating attack that demonstrates the true superiority of Garland's technology over even legendary summons. But the Invincible's attack does not end cleanly. The energy discharge from destroying two Eidolons simultaneously proves more powerful than the weapon was designed to handle. The beam continues beyond its intended targets, tearing through Alexandria's castle and into the city proper, carving a path of devastation through districts and infrastructure. Buildings collapse, fires erupt across multiple sectors, and thousands of Alexandria's citizens die in an instant, casualties of a weapon discharge that continues beyond all control or intention. The destruction leaves Alexandria in ruins worse than anything Queen Bran's wars inflicted upon it. Buildings collapse, fires spread through districts faster than they can be contained. Casualties mount into thousands as the city suffers damage that will take years to fully repair. Garnet witnesses her kingdom torn apart, watches helplessly as her people die, despite her best efforts to protect them, and the trauma of it breaks something inside her. She loses her voice, literally unable to speak, the psychological damage manifesting as physical symptom. The Queen of Alexandria, trained from childhood to lead through words and commands, finds herself mute and powerless, relegated to observer as events spiral beyond her control. Zidane and his companions witness Alexandria's destruction from Terra, seeing through viewing devices the catastrophe unfolding and racing to return to Gaia. But reaching Alexandria quickly enough to matter requires resources they do not possess, and by the time they arrive, the immediate crisis has passed, leaving only aftermath and consequences. They find Garnet traumatized and voiceless, the city devastated, survivors struggling to process what has happened, and begin the overwhelming task of recovery and rebuilding. Kuja has not finished his campaign of destruction. Having demonstrated his power and his willingness to use it without restraint, he makes his intentions clear through messages delivered to surviving kingdoms across Gaia. He will destroy all life on the planet, will erase every living being from existence, will leave Gaia as dead as Terra has become. This is not conquest or subjugation, but extinction, the complete erasure of Gaian life in service of Kuja's rage at his own mortality. If he must die, then existence itself will die with him, and he possesses both the power and the insanity to make good on this threat. The situation seems hopeless. Kuja wields power that dwarfs anything they can muster, his trance state granting him capabilities that exceed even legendary Eidolons. The nations of Gaia have been devastated by recent conflicts, their militaries depleted and their resources exhausted, in no position to mount organized resistance against someone who can destroy kingdoms with casual effort. The party themselves, despite their considerable skills and experience, have been repeatedly defeated when confronting Kuja directly, each encounter demonstrating the vast gulf between his power and their own. But surrender is not an option, and despair accomplishes nothing. They must find a way to stop Kuja, to prevent the extinction he promises, even if the odds against success seem insurmountable. Their search for solutions leads them to ancient texts and forgotten lore, to scholars and sages who have studied the nature of souls and existence, seeking any weakness in Kuja's trance state, or any means to counter his overwhelming power. They learn of Memoria, a place that exists outside normal reality, a realm where the planet's memories are stored and preserved. Memoria contains the history of Gaia, written not in words, but in the fabric of existence itself. Every event and moment preserved in crystallized memory that can be accessed by those who know how to navigate its depths. More importantly, Memoria connects to the crystal world, the realm where Kuja found his power, and reaching the crystal world requires passage through Memoria, regardless of what route one takes. To reach Memoria, they must first access Pandemonium, Garland's floating fortress that remains in Terra's skies despite its creator's death. The journey back to Terra is difficult, requiring resources and preparation that strain their capabilities, but they manage it through combination of determination and assistance from allies across Gaia. Regent Sid provides airships and supplies. Queen Garnet marshals what remains of Alexandria's resources to support the mission despite her inability to communicate verbally, and settlements across the continents contribute what they can to what everyone recognizes as Gaia's final chance to prevent its own extinction. The party that embarks on this final mission consists of Zidane, Garnet, Vivi, Steiner, Freya, Quina, Aiko, and Amaranth, each bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the desperate endeavor. They have grown considerably since the night Tantalus kidnapped Princess Garnet from Alexandria Castle, transformed from collection of strangers and reluctant allies into something approaching family through shared trauma and triumph. They trust each other completely, understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, have learned to coordinate their abilities in ways that multiply effectiveness beyond simple addition. The ascent through Pandemonium takes them through realms and dimensions that defy normal physics, through spaces where time flows differently and causality becomes suggestion rather than law. They battle creatures that seem to exist between states of being, guardians left behind by Garland, or perhaps spontaneously generated by Terra's dying reality. Obstacles that test their combat capabilities and their understanding of their own powers. Each member of the party reaches deeper into their potential, achieving trance states of their own through the extreme emotions of the journey, accessing temporary surges of power that allow them to overcome challenges that would otherwise prove insurmountable. At Pandemonium's summit, they find the gateway to Memoria, a shimmering portal that leads not to a physical location, but to a state of existence where memory becomes reality. Crossing the threshold is disorienting, the shift from normal reality to Memoria's realm requiring mental adjustment as much as physical transition. They emerge into a space that resembles no place they have ever been, a realm of floating platforms and crystallized moments where the past is present and visible, where Gaia's history surrounds them, informs both literal and symbolic. Memoria presents Gaia's memories in reverse chronological order, beginning with recent events and proceeding backward through time toward the planet's earliest moments. They walk through crystallized representations of events they witnessed themselves, seeing their own actions preserved in the planet's memory, then continue deeper into history before their births. They witness the mist wars that defined an earlier generation, see the construction of the ether tree and the beginning of Terra's parasitic relationship with Gaia, travel further back through ages of civilization rising and falling, through eras when different species dominated the world, through epochs that predate human existence entirely. The journey through Memoria is both educational and disturbing, revealing truths about Gaia's history that have been forgotten or deliberately suppressed. They learn that Gaia's and Terra's relationship extends further back than Garland's plan, that the two worlds have been entangled for longer than anyone realized, that cycles of conflict and attempted merger have occurred before with different outcomes. They discover evidence of previous heroes who stood against similar threats, of victories and defeats that shaped the world they inherited, of sacrifices made by people whose names are lost to time, but whose actions echo through the present. At Memoria's deepest point, where the planet's earliest memories are stored, they find the gateway to the crystal world, the realm that exists beneath reality, where souls originate and to which they return. Crossing this final threshold requires understanding and acceptance of their own mortality, recognition that they are temporary beings in an eternal cycle, acknowledgement that their individual existences matter despite their impermanence. Each member of the party confronts this truth in their own way, processing what it means to fight for a world they will eventually leave, to sacrifice for a future they may not live to see. The crystal world is a realm of pure potential, where existence itself remains undefined until consciousness gives it shape and meaning. They find Kuja here, seated on a throne of crystallized souls, his trance form radiating power that warps reality around him. He has been waiting for them, knowing they would come, anticipating this final confrontation with something approaching eagerness. Despite his nihilistic intentions, despite his stated desire to destroy all existence, Kuja craves validation and acknowledgement, wants witnesses to his transcendence and his rebellion against mortality. The battle that follows is beyond anything they have experienced. Kuja wielding magic that rewrites local reality with each casting, attacks that threaten to unmake their very existence rather than merely killing them. He summons replicas of creatures they have fought throughout their journey, testing them against their own history made manifest. He distorts time and space, creating situations where they must fight multiple versions of themselves from different moments, where causality loops back on itself in ways that make victory seem impossible. But they have learned through their journey, grown beyond their starting capabilities, and more importantly, they fight together with coordination that approaches precognition. When Zidane is overwhelmed, Steiner covers his retreat. When Garnet's magic falters, Aiko supplements her power. When Vivi's attacks prove insufficient, Freya creates openings that multiply their effectiveness. They are not individuals fighting alongside each other, but a unit functioning as a single organism, their bonds and trust allowing them to achieve what none could accomplish alone. Slowly, impossibly, they begin to prevail. Kuja's trance state, powerful as it is, cannot be sustained indefinitely, even with his enhanced control. The cracks begin to show, his attacks becoming less precise, his defenses showing vulnerabilities that did not exist at the battle's start. They press their advantage, coordinating their strongest attacks, combining their abilities in ways that transcend simple addition of individual power. And finally, after what feels like hours of desperate combat, Kuja falls, his trance state shattering as he collapses to the crystal world's surface, defeated but not dead. In his final moments before death claims him, Kuja experiences something unexpected. Rather than rage or despair, he feels relief. He has been fighting against his mortality for so long, struggling to transcend the limitations built into his creation, that the acceptance of death brings peace he did not anticipate. He looks at Zidane, sees in his brother creation someone who found meaning despite artificiality, who built identity and purpose despite being manufactured weapon, who chose differently than Kuja did himself. In his dying breath, Kuja speaks words that might be apology, or might be acknowledgement, or might simply be recognition of roads not taken. But Kuja's death does not end the crisis. His defeat triggers something in the crystal world, or perhaps his presence was holding something back, suppressing something that now emerges unconstrained. The realm begins to shake and destabilize, reality itself seeming to tear apart at the seams. And from the tears emerges Necron, though whether that is a name or a description of function remains unclear. This entity was not summoned by Kuja, nor is it his creation or tool. Rather, Necron is something that has always existed at the edges of reality, drawn forth by the overwhelming despair and death that has saturated recent events, manifesting in response to the suffering that has defined this crisis from beginning to end. Necron is death incarnate, not in the sense of individual mortality, but as the universal concept of ending and cessation. It is entropy given consciousness, the void that exists before creation and after destruction, the absence against which existence defines itself. Necron has witnessed the struggles and suffering that define life in all its forms, and has concluded that existence itself is the problem. If living beings must suffer, if consciousness inevitably leads to pain and loss and fear, then the merciful solution is to end existence entirely, to return everything to the void where suffering cannot occur because nothing exists to suffer. The logic is seductive in its simplicity and monstrous in its implications. Necron offers not conquest or subjugation, but dissolution, the complete erasure of existence justified by the argument that non-existence is preferable to the pain inherent in being alive. It is nihilism elevated to cosmic principle, the ultimate expression of despair masquerading as mercy, and it has been summoned or awakened by the very act of Kuja's defeat and his dying moment of acceptance. The party stands against Necron with arguments as much as weapons. They acknowledge that existence involves suffering, that consciousness brings pain alongside joy, that mortality makes every moment precious precisely because it is temporary. But they reject the conclusion that these truths justify erasure. Suffering has meaning when it is chosen in service of something larger, when it is accepted as cost of connection and love, and the opportunity to make choices that matter. To erase existence to prevent suffering is to prioritize absence over presence, to value nothing over something, to choose the void not because it is better, but because it is easier than facing the challenges that come with being alive. Each member of the party contributes to this argument through their own experiences. Vivi speaks of his limited lifespan, of knowing he will die soon, but insisting that his brief existence matters despite its impermanence. Garnet discusses losing her voice and her kingdom, suffering trauma that will never fully heal, but refusing to accept that this pain invalidates the joy and meaning she has found. Freya talks about loving someone who does not remember her, about enduring that specific form of grief, but maintaining that the love was real and worthwhile, regardless of its outcome. Steiner addresses how serving wrong causes damages the soul, but argues that recognizing error and choosing differently demonstrates that consciousness and choice have value despite their capacity for mistakes. The battle against Necron is as much philosophical as physical, a contest of wills and meanings rather than simple combat. Necron wields the power of ending attacks that threaten to erase them not just from existence but from having ever existed, removing their impact on history as though they never were. But they fight back with the power of choice and affirmation, with the declaration that they have the right to exist despite suffering, that consciousness justifies itself through the very act of choosing to continue. The battle pushes them beyond their limits, requires them to draw on reserves they did not know they possessed, forces them to confront the fundamental question of whether existence is worth preserving when it inevitably involves pain. And in the end, they answer that question not with words but with actions, with the simple refusal to accept erasure, with the insistence that something is always preferable to nothing, even when that something is difficult and painful and temporary. Necron falls, or rather disperses, or perhaps simply withdraws, the distinction unclear in a realm where concepts of victory and defeat operate differently than in physical reality. The entity's defeat does not destroy death or ending, does not eliminate suffering from existence, but it affirms that consciousness and choice have value despite these inevitable accompaniments to being alive. The crystal world stabilizes, no longer threatening to collapse into void, and the party finds themselves with one final challenge: escaping Memoria and the crystal world before the destabilization caused by the battle completes its course. The return journey through Memoria becomes a race against collapsing reality, the realm breaking apart behind them as they flee toward the gateway back to Terra. Platforms crumble and dissolve, pathways disappearing even as they cross them, the planet's memories fragmenting under the strain of what has occurred in the crystal world. They run and leap and fight through remaining obstacles, supporting each other when someone falters, refusing to leave anyone behind, even when doing so would ensure the other's survival. They emerge into pandemonium as it too begins to collapse, Terra's dying world finally succumbing to the entropy that has been consuming it for generations. The fortress shakes and tears apart around them, sections falling away into dimensional rifts or simply ceasing to exist as the reality that held them fractures completely. Their escape becomes increasingly desperate as exits close and passages collapse, the entire structure disintegrating beneath their feet. Zidane, in a moment of selfless heroism or perhaps simple refusal to abandon anyone, stops to ensure his companions reach the escape route to safety. He holds open a closing portal, pushes the others through when they hesitate to leave him, insists that they go while they still can. They protest, reach back to pull him through, but the portal collapses before he can follow, separating him from them as pandemonium completes its dissolution. The last image they have of Zidane is his smile, reassuring them that he will find another way, promising to return, though the promise seems impossible given the circumstances. They escape Terra as it dies completely, the planet finally succumbing to the entropy that has been consuming it since before Garland's plan began. The dimensional connection between Terra and Gaia severs as Terra's reality ceases to maintain coherence, ending forever the parasitic relationship that threatened to consume Gaian life. The ether tree stops generating mist, its function ended with Terra's dissolution, and across the mist continent the perpetual fog begins to disperse, revealing skies and horizons that have been hidden for generations. The party returns to Alexandria, bearing news of victory, but grieving for loss. Zidane is gone, trapped in Terra's collapse, likely dead, though they cannot confirm it without his body to verify. The knowledge that they have saved Gaia from extinction provides no comfort when the cost was losing someone they have come to love and depend upon. Each member processes the grief differently, some withdrawing into themselves, others throwing themselves into reconstruction efforts, all of them haunted by the image of Zidane's final smile as the portal closed between them. Months pass. Alexandria is rebuilt, its damaged districts reconstructed with architecture that incorporates lessons from the destruction's aftermath. Queen Garnet regains her voice gradually, the psychological trauma healing slowly as she works through the grief and guilt of the war's aftermath. The Mist Continent's nations begin to normalize relations, addressing the scars left by Bran's conquest and Kuja's attacks, establishing diplomatic frameworks meant to prevent future conflicts from escalating to similar devastation. The black mages from the village, knowing their time is limited, choose to spend their remaining days helping with reconstruction efforts, contributing labor and magic to rebuilding what was destroyed. Vivi works alongside them, his own mortality equally uncertain, determined to make every remaining day matter. Freya returns to Bermesia to aid in its reconstruction, finding Safratli there and attempting to help him recover memories he has lost. Steiner continues serving as captain of the Knights of Pluto, his loyalty to Garnet and Alexandria unchanged, but tempered by recognition that blind obedience is not virtue when orders are unjust. Life continues because it must, because the alternative is the void that Necron offered and they rejected. The world has changed profoundly, the mist dispersal revealing landscapes and connections that were previously hidden, forcing adaptation and adjustment across entire civilizations. But change is not inherently catastrophic, and the people of Gaia prove resilient, finding ways to build new lives and societies on the foundations of what was lost. Alexandria prepares a performance of I Want to Be Your Canary to celebrate the kingdom's recovery and provide closure for the traumas of recent years. The play that began this entire journey will be performed again. The familiar story of forbidden love and sacrifice taking on new meanings in light of everything that has happened. Tantalus, the theatre troupe that started it all, agrees to perform. Baku and the crew, returning to Alexandria, to put on a show that will honor both the dead and the living, that will celebrate survival and acknowledge what survival cost. The performance begins on a cool evening, the castle filled with citizens and nobles gathered to witness the spectacle. Garnet attends as queen, dressed in formal regalia, but with her mother's pendant replaced by something simpler, less ornate, more personal. She watches the play unfold, recognizing the lines she has heard dozens of times, finding in their familiarity a kind of comfort that comes from continuity despite change. The male lead takes the stage, and something about his movements catches Garnet's attention. The performer moves with distinctive grace, wields his prop weapons with skill that seems too genuine for mere theatrical training. As the play progresses and the male lead reveals his face to deliver key lines, Garnet recognizes features she thought she would never see again. It is Zidane, alive and somehow returned, performing in the play as though the months of absence never happened, as though his survival was never in question. The play concludes, the audience applauds, and Garnet rushes from her seat toward the stage. She runs through castle corridors she has known all her life, heading toward where Tantalus will be exiting, desperate to confirm that what she saw was real rather than wishful imagination. She emerges onto the castle grounds just as Zidane is removing his costume, and they stand facing each other across the space, neither quite believing the moment is real after months of separation and assumed death. Zidane survived Pandemonium's collapse through combination of luck, skill, and the same stubborn refusal to accept impossibility that has defined him throughout the journey. He found a way out through collapsing dimensions, navigated his way back to Gaia through routes that probably should not have existed, and returned to Alexandria at precisely the time when Tantalus needed a performer for the play's male lead. His arrival is impossible and entirely characteristic, refusing to let something as inconsequential as dimensional collapse and probable death prevent him from keeping his implicit promise to return. They rush toward each other, and their reunion is wordless and overwhelming. Months of grief and fear dissolving in the simple reality of presence. The others gather around, the entire party reunited for the first time since Terra, and for a moment they simply stand together, alive and whole, survivors of an ordeal that should have destroyed them, but instead revealed their capacity for resilience and choice. The story of Final Fantasy IX concludes not with grand proclamations or detailed explanations of how Zidane survived, but with this simple reunion, this affirmation that despite everything, despite suffering and loss and the void that threatened to consume existence itself, they are still here. They are alive. They have the opportunity to build futures of their own choosing. And that opportunity has value precisely because it was hard won and nearly lost. The themes that run through Final Fantasy IX are woven into every aspect of its narrative, from the grand scale of planetary crisis to the intimate moments of character interaction. The game explores what it means to be alive when you know death is certain, what gives existence value despite its impermanence, how identity is constructed when memory is unreliable and origins are artificial. It asks whether consciousness justifies itself simply by choosing to continue, whether suffering invalidates joy, or whether both are necessary components of genuine existence. Vivi's journey represents the most direct engagement with these questions. He learns he is manufactured, discovers his lifespan is limited, watches others like him stop functioning without warning or ceremony. His entire arc is about finding meaning despite these revelations, about choosing to matter even when time is short and purpose is unclear. His conclusion, that his brief existence has value because he chose to use it helping others and forming connections, provides the emotional core around which the rest of the narrative revolves. Zidane's discovery of his artificial nature mirrors Vivi's crisis, but with different implications. He was created to be a weapon, designed specifically to commit genocide, his entire existence an affront to the world he has grown to love. But his response to this knowledge, after initial breakdown, is to insist that what he was created for matters less than what he has chosen to become. His actions throughout the journey, his consistent choice of compassion over expedience, of protection over destruction, define him more than Garland's intentions ever could. Garnet's transformation from sheltered princess to capable queen occurs through systematic stripping away of everything she thought defined her. She loses her kingdom, her mother, her voice, her eidolons, her assumed identity as native Alexandrian, and through these losses discovers that her worth is not determined by titles or possessions or even abilities, but by choices she makes when everything else has been taken away. Her character arc demonstrates that identity is not what you have but what you do when you have nothing. The game's treatment of mortality extends beyond individual characters to civilizations and worlds. Terra is dying, has been dying for generations, and its response to this inevitable end is to attempt consuming another world to extend its existence. The choice represents the ultimate expression of survival instinct taken to its logical extreme, and the game clearly positions this as wrong despite understanding the desperate logic behind it. one world's survival cannot justify another's extinction. Necessity does not excuse genocide, and the attempt to escape mortality through parasitism is ultimately self-defeating. The environmental themes run throughout the narrative, from the myth's revelation as artificial phenomenon disrupting natural cycles to the ether tree's function as instrument of planetary exploitation. The parallels to real-world environmental degradation are clear but never heavy-handed, presented through the story rather than lectures or exposition dumps. The restoration of natural cycles following Terra's dissolution and the mist dispersal suggests hope that damage can be healed when its sources are addressed, though the game does not pretend recovery is instantaneous or painless. Necron's appearance at the narrative's climax has been controversial since the game's release, seen by some as coming from nowhere and by others as the logical culmination of the themes explored throughout. The entity represents the ultimate expression of nihilism, the argument that suffering inherent in existence justifies erasing existence entirely. The party's rejection of this argument, their insistence that consciousness and choice have value despite inevitable pain, provides the philosophical resolution to questions raised throughout the journey. The game's structure supports its themes through progression from personal stakes to planetary crisis, without losing sight of individual human drama. The journey begins with a simple kidnapping and gradually expands to encompass conflicts between kingdoms, revelations about the world's true nature, and finally confrontation with death itself made manifest. But even at the cosmic scale, the narrative remains grounded in characters, relationships, and personal growth, never allowing spectacle to overwhelm the human element. The art direction presents a world that blends medieval fantasy with steampunk technology, creating distinctive aesthetic that sets Final Fantasy IX apart from its predecessors' darker science fiction tones. The return to fantasy roots after several games with more modern or futuristic settings was intentional, a celebration of the series' history while incorporating modern storytelling sophistication. The visual design of locations, from Alexandria's castle built into cliff faces to Lindblum's industrial tiers to the impossible geometry of Pandemonium, creates memorable spaces that convey character and history through architecture and layout. The music, composed by Nobuo Uematsu, provides emotional foundation throughout. Themes like Melodies of Life capture the bittersweet tone that defines much of the narrative, beauty tinged with melancholy, joy shadowed by awareness of impermanence. Character themes reflect personalities and arcs, from Vivi's uncertain melody to Beatrix's martial grandeur to Kuja's theatrical intensity. The soundtrack supports rather than overshadows, enhancing emotional beats without demanding attention away from story and character. The combat system, while primarily mechanical rather than narrative-focused, reinforces themes through its trance mechanics. Characters enter trance when their emotional states surge beyond normal containment, gaining temporary access to enhanced abilities that represent their deepest potentials. The mechanic creates ludic reinforcement of the narrative's emphasis on emotion and consciousness as sources of strength, making gameplay expression of thematic concerns rather than merely challenge divorced from story. Final Fantasy IX achieved both commercial success and critical acclaim upon release, though initial reception was somewhat muted compared to its immediate predecessors. The return to fantasy after 7 and 8's more contemporary settings was seen by some as regression rather than intentional callback to series roots. But over time, appreciation for the game's accomplishments has grown. Recognition of how it balances accessibility with depth, spectacle with intimacy, creating experience that rewards both casual engagement and deep analysis. The game's influence on subsequent entries in the series can be seen in their increased attention to character relationships and their willingness to engage with philosophical questions alongside traditional heroic narratives. The exploration of identity and consciousness, the questioning of what gives existence value, the examination of how individuals find meaning in temporary lives. These themes recur throughout later Final Fantasy games in various forms, suggesting lasting impact on the series' direction. The story concludes with reunion and hope, but does not pretend that trauma disappears or that suffering has been eliminated from existence. The characters carry scars from their journey, psychological and sometimes physical marks that will never completely heal. But they also carry connections forged through shared ordeal, understanding that they survived because they refused to face challenges alone, recognition that meaning emerges from relationships and choices rather than being inherent in circumstances or origins. The final image of the party reunited with Zidane returned against all probability serves as visual representation of the game's central argument. Existence continues because conscious beings choose to continue it, finding value in presence over absence, in connection over isolation, in the messy, complicated reality of being alive over the clean simplicity of void. They have stared into the darkness that Necron represented, acknowledged the suffering that comes with consciousness, and chosen to exist anyway, because the alternative, however tempting in moments of despair, is ultimately rejection of everything that makes experience worthwhile. So we leave them there, together in Alexandria, as evening light fades and stars emerge in sky no longer hidden by mist. They have saved their world not through destiny or prophesied heroism, but through simple determination to keep going, to keep choosing, to keep affirming that their brief existences matter despite inevitable endings. The story does not promise they will never suffer again, or that their remaining years will be easy. It promises only that they will face whatever comes together, that their bonds will sustain them through difficulties ahead, and that choosing to continue living is itself an act of courage and meaning. Final Fantasy IX stands as testament to the power of stories that engage seriously with questions of meaning and mortality, while maintaining hope that these questions have answers worth finding. It demonstrates that games can explore philosophy without sacrificing entertainment, can address difficult truths without descending into despair, can celebrate existence while acknowledging its costs. The journey from Alexandria to the Crystal World and back becomes metaphor for conscious experience itself. Temporary, uncertain, often painful, but ultimately worth the effort of participation. If you found meaning in this exploration of memory and choice, of artificial life discovering genuine purpose, of worlds ending and individuals persisting, consider leaving your thoughts in the comments below. Share which moments resonated most deeply with you, which characters spoke to your own struggles with identity and mortality. And if you want to see more deep examinations of the stories that shape our medium, that thing you do with the thumbs up helps ensure these explorations can continue. Until next time, remember that what you were created for matters less than what you choose to become, and that consciousness justifies itself through the simple act of choosing to continue.